The habits you do every day are not making your life better. They might actually be making it worse. Not because you're doing the wrong habits, but because you're doing the right ones completely wrong. And the worst part? Nobody tells you this. Every productivity video you've ever watched assumed you already had the foundation right. You didn't. Neither did I. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what that foundation is and why almost everyone is missing it. Here's what doing habits by default actually looks like. You wake up. You reach for your phone before your eyes are even fully open. You tell yourself you'll journal later. You don't. You work out 3 days in a row, feel great, skip 4 days, and quietly stop counting. You've read about habits. You know the theory. And still, nothing sticks. This isn't a willpower problem. Behavioral scientist Wendy Wood spent decades studying automaticity, the process by which behaviors become unconscious and effortless. Her research found that roughly 43% of what we do every day is automatic. Not chosen, just executed. The problem isn't that you lack habits. The problem is that your automatic behaviors are running on old, broken programming. You're doing the motions, but the signals that were supposed to reward and reinforce them, they're either absent or misfiring completely. That's what this video is actually about. Habit 1. Your morning routine. Most people treat their morning routine like a performance. They've seen the 5 a.m. cold shower, the journaling, the meditation, the green juice. They string 6 things together and call it a routine. And when they miss one piece, when they sleep in or skip the journal, the whole thing collapses. That's not a routine. That's a fragile ritual. The science here is implementation intentions, first formalized by psychologist Peter Gollwitzer. His research consistently showed that people who attach behaviors to specific situational cues, when X happens, I will do Y, are significantly more likely to actually follow through than people who rely on motivation or memory. Most people's morning routines have no cues. They exist as a list, not a chain. So the fix isn't adding more steps. It's linking each behavior to the one before it. Coffee maker turns on, that's your cue to drink a glass of water. Sitting down with coffee, that's your cue for 5 minutes of silence. No app required. No alarm. The environment does the work. You're just installing the chain. Pause here. Let the simplicity of that land. It's not what they expected. Habit 2. Exercise. You already know exercise is good for you. So why do most people quit within 6 weeks of starting? Roy Baumeister's research on ego depletion gives us part of the answer. Ego depletion is the idea that self-control draws from a limited cognitive resource. Every decision you make, every moment of resistance costs something. By the time most people get to the gym after a full workday, the resource is nearly empty. This is why I'll go after work fails so reliably. It's not a scheduling problem. It's a resource problem. But here's what most people miss. Baumeister's research also showed that small wins, tiny acts of follow-through, can partially restore that resource. B.J. Fogg at Stanford calls this habit anchoring, attaching a new behavior to an existing one that already has momentum. You're not trying to build a gym habit. You're trying to borrow energy from a habit that's already working, already lacing up your shoes in the morning. That's your anchor. Already commuting? That's your anchor. The behavior doesn't need more motivation. It needs a piggyback ride. Speed this section up slightly. It should feel effortless to hear. Match the idea. Habit 3. Reading or learning. Everyone has a book they're in the middle of. Most people have been in the middle of it for 4 months. Here's the behavioral reason. Context-dependent memory, a well-documented phenomenon in cognitive science, shows that we remember information better when we're in the same environment or cognitive state in which we learned it. Reading a book about focus while half watching TV at 10 p.m. doesn't just slow you down. It actively degrades what you retain. The fix is stupidly simple. Consistent context. Same chair. Same time. Same mental state. You're not building a reading habit. You're building a context. The brain starts to associate the location with focus, and the cognitive load of getting started drops significantly. Hermann Ebbinghaus mapped this more than a century ago with his forgetting curve research. Spaced, context-consistent exposure compounds retention in ways that random, high-volume reading cannot. You don't need to read more. You need to read in a place your brain has already learned to trust. The next habit surprises most people, and it's probably the one you're doing right now as you watch this. Slight pause after the rehook. Let the tension build. Habit 4. Plan your day. Planning feels productive. Neuroscience says otherwise, or at least it says the way most people plan is counterproductive. Most people plan in open-ended terms. Work on the project. Be more focused. Handle emails. These aren't plans. They're intentions with no behavioral architecture behind them. Cognitive load theory, developed by educational psychologist John Sweller, explains that the brain has a finite capacity for active decision-making. When your to-do list is vague, your brain expends real cognitive energy just figuring out what the task actually means before doing it. That friction is invisible, but it's real, and it compounds across a full day. The behavioral fix, task specificity with time boxing. Not work on the project. Draft the intro paragraph between 9 and 9:25 a.m. Research by Cal Newport and others on deep work structures shows that time-boxed, concretely defined tasks reduce startup friction by giving the brain a clear on-ramp. You're not making yourself work harder. You're removing the ambiguity that makes starting feel hard. Deliver this section with a slightly flat, matter-of-fact tone. Don't oversell it. Habit 5. Rest. This is the one. This is the habit almost everyone is doing wrong, and it's the one that undermines everything else on this list. Most people think rest means the absence of effort. Lie on a couch. Scroll. Decompress. That's not rest. That's passive stimulation, and neuroscientifically, it's closer to low-grade stress than recovery. Matthew Walker's research on sleep architecture and the work of Mary Helen and Moore-Dinoyon on the brain's default mode network both point to the same finding. Genuine mental restoration requires unstructured, unstimulated downtime. Not scrolling, not half-watching, not podcasts in the background. Actual quiet, the default mode network, the system responsible for memory consolidation, self-reflection, and creative synthesis, only activates fully in the absence of external input. Every time you replace rest with stimulation, you're denying your brain its maintenance window. You go to sleep with a full cognitive cache. You wake up still tired, and then you blame your morning routine, your diet, your lack of discipline. The problem started the night before when you picked up your phone instead of putting it down. Real rest is not passive. It's a deliberate behavior, and almost nobody practices it. Slow down here. This one needs to breathe. Here's what connects all 5 of these. It was never about the habits themselves. It was about the invisible architecture around them. The cues, the context, the cognitive conditions that either allow behaviors to stick or silently prevent them from ever taking root. You weren't doing it wrong because you lacked discipline. You were doing it wrong because nobody showed you what the structure actually looks like underneath. Remember the open loop from the beginning? The idea that you might be doing the right habits completely wrong? That's what it was. Not the habits. The scaffolding. One thing to try this week. Pick one habit from this list. Just one. And ask yourself, what's the cue? What's the context? What's draining the resource before you even get there? You don't need to fix all 5 at once. That's actually counterproductive. If you want to go deeper on how your environment is quietly shaping your behavior without your awareness, there's a video on this channel that goes into exactly that. Watch it before you redesign anything, because there's one more layer to this, and it's the part most people never think to question.